Welcome back to the channel, you guys. It is Comic Kid here again, and today we will be saying nice things about Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever. Now, when the movie originally came out, it was a sequel to the Tim Burton and Michael Keaton Batman movies with Batman and Batman Returns. And then after some behind-the-scenes drama between Burton and the studio, as well as them wanting to sell more toys and a few other factors, Burton was eventually scrapped for the third one, and Schumacher was brought on board. Now, it is no secret that Schumacher took a significantly different approach to Batman than Burton's did. And despite the fact that he, tried to place them in the same universe, they really feel like separate movies entirely. Now, I do say movies plural because obviously there's Batman and Robin as well, but we will just be focusing on Batman Forever for today. And don't worry, eventually, yes, we will get to Batman and Robin. But to kick things off, Batman Forever is not considered to be the worst Batman movie ever made, but it is definitely one of the lowest ranking for a lot of people. Some common critiques against the film include a drastic and definitely more silly approach to The Dark Knight, some significant inaccuracies with the comics, and then just general poor decision making all around. Now, I actually do love these movies. I remember always liking Batman Forever and Batman and Robin as a kid. So right off the bat, I can look back on these movies with a sense of nostalgia, although I do pick up on more things significantly better now that I'm older. Now, in terms of the cast themselves, it's really got a stacked cast. I kind of forgot that Drew Barrymore was in this movie even. But to kind of focus on the main few with Val Kilmer, Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, and Nicole Kidman as well, I actually don't think that the cast really brought their A game to this movie either, and I normally can say nice things about the cast and nothing against them personally, but Tommy Lee Jones is generally a more serious actor, and to see him play a version of Two-Face that is essentially just the Joker in this felt very off. Nicole Kidman has had significantly better performances since this, and Val Kilmer especially, both before and after Batman Forever. Now, I do want to say that Val Kilmer feels almost the most Bruce Wayne to me, or rather, at least he fit this physical description of Bruce Wayne a little bit better than Michael Keaton, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, Keaton is still one of my favorite Batman of all time, but in terms of actual look, I feel like Val Kilmer is honestly the most Bruce Wayne that we've ever had in live action. At least I feel like you could totally make a case for that argument. And so I do applaud them on their choice for getting Val Kilmer. It's a shame they couldn't get him back for the sequel, but I know a lot of people praise Kilmer's performance in this movie, but again, I feel like he's had significantly better both before and after, and he kind of seemed to figure out early on that he just didn't really want to be there. And then last but not least, that leaves Chris O'Donnell. Now, Chris is our only live-action Robin on the big screen at the moment, and I honestly don't know if it's better or worse that he was a bit older of a Dick Grayson. I do feel like O'Donnell got a little bit of the short end of the stick because Robin felt very shoehorned into this movie, and I feel bad. If I'm not mistaken, he mentioned that they had a spin-off movie for Robin planned, but Batman and Robin did so poorly that it just immediately killed it. And while I didn't love him as Robin, I do feel like there could have been something there, at least for the 90s. And so I don't entirely fault O'Donnell for everything that happened with these two movies, but I also don't know that he was the best choice at the same time. And I almost forgot to talk about Jim Carrey. I actually feel like Jim Carrey is the best performance in this movie. I know a lot of people do enjoy his Riddler, and there are a few moments where he's a little too Jim Carrey, in my opinion, but all in all, I felt like he actually captured that menacingness to the Riddler and made for a mostly faithful representation of the character. Like I said, there are points where he's more Jim Carrey than actual Edward Nygma, but in terms of casting, I feel like Jim Carrey was a pretty solid choice for the Riddler. Now, one of the other things I will say in defense of this movie is for as much as people hate on Batman and Robin for Clooney's suit having nipples, Val Kilmer's suit also has nipples. I don't know why people only complain about the Clooney one. If you're gonna hate the nipples, hate it on both suits. And I don't know, maybe that's something in defense of Batman and Robin, but we'll circle around to that in a few weeks when I muster up the courage to watch Batman and Robin. Now, I mentioned earlier that the tone was one of the criticisms against the movie, but I feel like you could also argue that that is a plus to it as well. Obviously, making the film a bit sillier in tone takes it back to a more Silver Age era of Batman, where he was just very, very silly, doing all sorts of things that did not make sense. And so Schumacher's take on Batman is still charmingly accurate in its own ways, I guess you would say. Obviously, nowadays when most people think of Batman, they do think dark and gritty, but I do think having these sillier, more fun elements to these movies does have its pros. That said, a counter-criticism to this point is that Bruce Wayne is arguably even more emo than Robert Pattinson's Batman in this. Like, he's got all these psychological issues that Nicole Kidman's Dr. Chase is trying to help him figure out, and it doesn't quite make sense and doesn't really need to be there, and it doesn't really add a whole lot to the movie either. And so everything with that just feels very, like, that's where the brooding was. And for all the problems that this movie has, this is far from one of the biggest, but I just thought it was an odd choice to go that route as well. Maybe it just needed a little bit of extra development, I don't know, but it was weird. Now, obviously, like I already mentioned, this movie will have a sense of nostalgia for those who watched it in the 90s or who were kids in the 90s. But I feel like it does still have a 90s action movie charm to it as well. I don't know, I feel like not a lot of movies that came out in the 90s were necessarily the best movies and have not really aged as well as movies from the 80s have. But if you like the 90s era, then there's moments and parts of this that you will enjoy as well. And then in terms of cinematography as well, I do think there are still some interesting shots in this. Some parts of it straight up feel like they're supposed to be homages to like the Adam West type stuff, and other parts definitely feel like they're trying to mimic Burton's style a little bit. And I do feel like that gives Batman Forever a bit of a like Justice League feel to it, where it's almost like a Frankenstein between what he wanted his style to be while also trying to mimic Burton. And so as much as I admire that effort, I do think it ultimately ended up hurting the movie. And then from there, in terms of CGI, I don't hold CGI against any movie really, but I do know people like to talk about it, and it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. There's definitely plenty of CG moments in this where you're a little like, ooh, that is so fake. But, I mean, what you gonna do? So, for all the other issues in this movie, the CGI is far from its least troublesome. And then from there, in terms of the music, it does try to balance that original score mixed with original music from outside artists and like a mix of people. I don't know, I feel like that was a super common thing to try and do for movies in the 90s, and I mean, that's, again, the music in this movie is fine. It's fitting enough. It's hardly, as inspired as, the original Danny Elfman score or something like Hans Zimmer as well. But again, the music did its job in this movie. Now, in regards to the humor of the film, it takes a lot to make me laugh in a movie, and I found myself laughing more at points where I wasn't supposed to be laughing, especially kind of towards the middle there when there's like a Two-Face moment, and then it cuts to Dick Grayson, and he's like dancing his wet clothes onto a clothesline, and then he like winks at Alfred on his way out, and then it just cuts right back to whatever was going on with Two-Face. Like, I just couldn't help but laugh at how random that scene was. And so, on a plus side, it did make me laugh, but on the bad side, I don't think I was supposed to be laughing then. But there are some, more obvious and intentional bits of humor where it still got like a slight chuckle out of me or something like that as well. And so the humorous moments for the film did have their advantages and did work in their own aspects. But now that is about everything that I have to say about this movie. All in all, I do think Batman Forever is rewatchable. It's not going to be my first choice for a Batman movie like ever, but if my friends and I ever rewatched every Batman movie, I would have no issue sitting through this one. And I do gotta say, I am almost excited to watch Batman and Robin now, just to see how it compares to this one, because it's been forever since I have seen both of these movies, and so I'm really curious to see how my opinion of them might have changed. But all in all, that is it for today, you guys. Let me know what you think of Batman Forever down in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe as well, and I will see you guys again real soon.